Check. Alumbra-me para o áudio. Bateu-me está rápido, ainda está para você o telefone.
Okay, the audio is working. That's good. I don't like the light. Okay.
I think I go.
Right.
Speaker. Echo canceling. And microphone array. It's good. Array is not the right one.
Check, need. Check.
Is it? Was it better?
Check. Need.
Test.
Okay. Perfect. Check, need.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess everybody can hear us.
Test.
Where did okay. Louder? So we're using
Test.
Yeah.
Does this work?
So we're just a little bit of explaining the. No, I already have one. I thought, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we're using the mic because we're streaming everything online. So this is why we needed to kind of use the mic. But I know that, I mean, from the audience, you can hear us. So it's I love live sessions, it's. Thanks. This is how we drink it in Albania with 2 cups.
Just in case, because we have trust issues.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we have to start. So first, thank you everyone for coming. This event is like a hybrid setup. So we are also live on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'm super happy to and it's an honor to have the launch of the book at the space. But the story I wanted to touch a little bit about that, how the story about the book came out and hosting this event, because bringing out is the book was just launched on Thursday or Friday.
We put it out there on Thursday night.
and the official launch is today. There was a pre-order available, and now it's the official launch today.
We were able to make in record time that we were also saying this earlier to have the event for the launch, and yeah, it's a great pleasure. So getting in.
Now I was going to say thank you actually, because this wasn't planned, and we were at the ecosystem meeting on Friday, and we were like, the book launch is on Tuesday, and he's like, we should do something about it. Like, what can we do about it? And before we knew it, we had an event set up here, not realizing that, of course, yesterday was also public holiday. It didn't give us much time to organize it. But it's still really nice to do that. And thank you for...
Oh, it's already, yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for giving us space and giving us the opportunity to do it and live stream it.
Absolutely.
And you've been a pleasure to work with and set it up in record time. So, and also thank you for Mela for organizing most of the back end as well.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure. So just getting straight to the point, like a little bit about you, like, and let's start from let's say the childhood. Who are you? Like, where do you come from? Where have you lived? How was your childhood?
Childhood was good, no drama. It was pretty good. No, I was born in Germany. So I'm like some of you, I'm an expat. I was born an expat. I grew up in Germany. My parents are Italian. So growing up already, I had that kind of mix in me. But I always felt like Germany wasn't the country for me. And I wanted to explore. And when I was a child, I always thought I would end up being in Italy. But there's so much more to the world. So eventually I started studying. I studied in England. And I thought like, wow, this was nice, but what is there out there which is bigger and better or different at least? So I went to Dubai, lived there, went back to Germany. And then I started traveling. I went to Australia, stayed there for 9 years. I always say Australia is the country that I lived the longest by choice, because you don't always can choose where you're born. But yeah, I lived there for 9 years, and then during COVID, I came back to Europe and started nomading. My first thought was to move back to Europe, but to move to Spain, to Madrid, where I studied as well. And I thought that's going to be my base. And then I thought like, hang on a second, why already decided now? It's COVID, the numbers are crazy somewhere always. And there are always so many countries that you can go. So I lived a little bit in Greece. I lived a little bit in Spain. I lived in Germany. Then I lived in Portugal. And then eventually I discovered Albania almost by accident, and I liked it. So
I think we'll get there. We'll get there
back.
in a moment. But you mentioned that you started traveling very early. Also, so how did that affect your life? Like I mean, looking back at it now, like how did all the traveling, different cultures, how did that affect you?
It affected me a lot. I was very fortunate. At the time I was in Germany, there was a European school system, which was funded by the European Parliament, and Italy was paying that. It's a private school. We couldn't have afforded to go there, but Italy was paying for that, so I was very lucky. And I was in the Italian language section, but we had 4 more language sections. We had a French, we had a German, an English, and a Dutch one. So even as a very young child, I was surrounded by many nationalities. And you know, when you say English language section, it doesn't stop at England. It's Canada, it's US, it's South Africa, it's Australia, it's New Zealand, Scotland, Ireland, and all of that. So when I graduated, I had so many different countries around me. So naturally, when I started traveling, I started discovering how much more there is and how much more alike we are and how much more open we are and what there is there. So it was eye-opening in some ways. And I really kept pushing myself, going somewhere, making myself a bit more uncomfortable. So growing up, I grew up in an Italian community in Germany. So most of my food, for example, was pretty much Italian. But when you go to England,
it's been a great experience. Yeah, just living in Germany, having Italian food, that's the best.
In theory, yes, theory. But I always say when they assign moms, I got the only Italian mom that doesn't like cooking. So it wasn't always the best time. But my dad had a restaurant, so that was balanced out in some ways.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier talking about Madrid, and that's where you did your executive MBA. Why? How did you choose your MBA? What was your inspiration behind choosing that as a kind of professional degree? But also, why Madrid? How come is the?
Well, I did. I opened my business 8 years ago, my consulting business in Australia. And as I was growing up, I had an undergrad degree. I didn't have a master's degree. I always thought I want to do a master's degree. I've always been very ambitious. So when I did my undergrad degree, I said, okay, there's a Fortune 100 list of MBAs. I will do one of them. And everyone was laughing at me. And eventually, as I progressed my career, I always kept going back to the thought of doing an MBA. And when I started consulting, eventually we started getting bigger clients. And as we got bigger clients, we were also competing with the big four. And as we were competing with the big four, a lot of my peers had MBAs. So I felt like, okay, where do they do MBAs? And most of them did them at a really good school in Australia. So I was like, that's nice, but what else is there? And then I discovered the community of IE in Madrid. And they're very like-minded, very open-minded, very international, very focused on entrepreneurship, startups. It was a global program divided in different countries. And it really sang to me. And then I managed to get into the Global Executive MBA program. And that was chosen in that way. Madrid was a nice add-on. I didn't know much about Madrid. I like Spain. But I also fell in love with Madrid. So it's one of my favorite cities. I always say Tirana reminds me of a young Madrid in some ways as well.
I also visited Madrid last year for Christmas for the first time. And it's one of the cities that when I was there, but also when I got back, it made me a lot to think about. There's a lot of resemblance, more not into as a city, but as a vibe, like people in general. I don't know how I felt that, but then after speaking with many people, I came across a lot of people who thought the same thing. The energy, it's amazing. So yeah, it's something. But yeah, Tirana, of course, it's a long way and has a lot of work to do. So yeah, hopefully we're on the right path, and yeah, it's definitely getting there.
Madrid is better than Barcelona, just in case anyone has any doubts. Right?
And also don't say that there. I mean, just don't mention the Barcelona thing. It's like quite hostile, the environment there.
It is actually.
You mentioned about getting into after getting the MBA into the consulting, and then getting into your professional career. First, how did you get into the consulting and working for the big fours, and how was that experience for you? And yeah, the second part of the question would be like, how did that affect your life, your lifestyle, and everything?
I never worked for the big four, just to make sure that I don't get this wrong. I was competing with them. I, like most of them, I think I had always a vision where to go, but I never had a clear pathway. And how I started my business was pretty much like that. I got headhunted to join a competitor. I was working in conferences. And on my first day, I realized they didn't really want to hire me. They just want to get me away because I was doing a good job. And then I thought like, okay, this is the time. This is the time. I always say probation is for both. So I had an offer to do contract work for 40% of my time. And then I thought, what do I do with the other 60% of my time? And I thought, well, I could live with the 40%. Why not start a business? And I started doing conferences. And when I started doing conferences, people came and people loved it and felt very inspired. And it was very nice to get that feedback. But the next question was like, Dom, we got all this inspiration now, but how do we do it? And how do we do it turned into, okay, we will do workshops. And by doing workshops, I wasn't qualified. So I was getting in gurus from overseas, from the States, from England. It cost me a lot of money. And I was like, but I'm going to be in the class so I can also learn how this works and I can apply this to the business. And then I kept getting good feedback that they enjoyed my comments and my knowledge because I've always been driven by knowledge. So I love to read and inform myself and to build myself. And eventually I got offers to run the workshops myself. And before I knew it, I was coaching and consulting in businesses. And I was tackling bigger projects and bigger areas and searching for more knowledge. And qualifying myself and certifying myself in other areas. And then that's how we started.
Did you have like a turning point when you decided, okay, so I'm good at this, or was it all natural, like you said?
No, I was not natural at all. In fact, when I'm a public speaker now, but at the time, even at university, I needed to have people to guide me because I was terrible at it. So I am one of those that doesn't believe that you have to be natural at it. I certainly learned it, and I'm still learning every day. I had a turning moment. I was having this consultant that I flew in from the UK. It was costing me $9,000 just in cost to get him over. And then it costed me another $20,000 for 4 days of work. And when we finished the workshop, everyone was very happy. But we said, Dom, actually we preferred your style. We would pay you the same money to do the workshop, but just with you without the consultant. And I was like, okay, maybe I should become a coach.
That's a pretty great turning point.
It was a turning point, yes.
Okay, so just getting into talking about the book. The book talks about mindset, work-life balance, and the future of work. And this is like something that when we were talking earlier, I wanted to ask, like, is it okay if we can refer it as a post-pandemic book, or is it something that it really got inspired, and it's like, and that's an important thing because yeah, the new normal, it's something that's after 2020 we all kind of went through that whole transformation. But before going into that, I would just ask, how did you when did you start that? Was that a point where you said, I'm going to write a book based on my experiences? And was that, again, was it a natural process? And also, how was that that process into the point where writing a book?
I'll go a little bit further to that. I think what happened for me is I'm a business coach. So I was consulting in companies and helping them become better workplaces. So I work predominantly in the people area and the strategy area, and I help them with any matters on that. So ironically, before COVID, I was one of them working and being a workaholic and flying in and out of companies. And I thought, that's my ticket. If I want to do this work, I have to live up with that. So that's where the journey really started. And then the pandemic happened and it changed our life, and we can go into deeper on that. But when I started living very differently and having my own great shift, I started becoming much more creative again and being able to write again and having time to write. And I started writing blog pieces, sharing some of my own research that I've done, some of my findings that I've done, some of the work I've been doing with companies, and some of my own experience. And I was really enjoying it and got good feedback, and one blog piece led to another. And before I knew it, I was writing a book. That's pretty much how it went. I didn't intend to start with it, but that's how it happened.
That's and that's, I mean, natural. That's how this whole, and I guess from 2020 now, it's like 3 years now. But when you think of it, there are so many. I mean, times have passed so fast, and there are so many learnings, and it feels like we've been on a lifetime of learnings and experiencing new ways of just working, but also in our day-to-day life. But mainly the professional aspect has influenced a lot. So in the book, there's I'm quoting this. You say that work-life balance, it's over. We are entering a phase of work-life integration, and this is quite interesting. How do you what do you have to say about this?
Well, I see there is a big appetite for having a bit of a different mindset. I was speaking at the conference on Wednesday, and I was sharing similar thoughts that there's these two big mindsets that we have. And a lot of employees these days have the mindset that they really want to enjoy life as well, that there needs to be more in life than just work. And if you think about that in that way, we are integrating life and work in a greater way than ever before. And probably in some ways, we're going back to the very roots where life was just part of the day, and it wasn't reserved for a specific hour, a specific time, or a specific day in the week, but it was just part of our human being and what we had to do to sustain ourselves. So when you think about like that, it's like, how can we find a greater integration and a better way of living and working in a way that it doesn't drain us out, in a way that you don't need a holiday every 2 months because we're completely drained and we need to recalibrate for a second, in a way that our purpose is aligned with our work, and it's part of who we are, and it's not the ticket to freedom when we are 65 years of age, is not allowing us to do something on the weekend, and getting out of that maze. So that's what I refer to when I talk about work-life integration, and how can we find a greater way of really integrating those two worlds that are our biggest time consumers, the time after work and the time before work, time at work and the time after work.
And I'm just something that actually it's connected. It's also you mentioned the word balance, and I think more and more now we resonate and we kind of reflect into the point where finding the balance, and also one of the chapters into the book is that now is the ultimate challenge, finding the balance. So what is first? I want to get into like more personal about you. What is balance for you, and how does your experience working from the like consultancy and from that kind of going to the point where you're kind of coaching now, and how do you kind of interpret balance on your own, but then how are you now resonating this?
When I was pre-COVID, I was flying in and out of client sites. So I would spend a couple of weeks at one client and then move on and then go to the next client. So a good month for me, or a good week for me actually, would be I only had 4 flights. I would work around 80 hours and I would be home Saturday and Sunday. I would sleep 2 nights in my own bed with my wife at the time. So that would be a good week. And when you think about that, it's quite sad in some ways, because I wasn't spending 2 weeks in Tirana. I was spending 2 weeks in some very remote areas, alone. There were no nomads, there were no other colleagues of mine. So I was going alone into the clients, to see the clients. So when I look at that, I was completely off balance. The only close things to balance is I would coach leaders and organization CEOs and business partners. I would help them find balance, but my balance was completely off. So in some way, I was not teaching what I was preaching. I was looking after my staff, ironically, and using the same techniques. I've always done that, but I wasn't living the same life myself. So I was completely off balance. Now, balance for me is having a lifestyle and having a work-life integration that allows me to be full of energy at the end of the day in different ways. It allows me to have balance between work and doing things that I really enjoy on a private level, like eating healthy, doing exercise, socializing, being around my family, my friends. Now living in Europe, I'm seeing my nieces and nephews grow up, which for me is a great pleasure. But when I was living in Australia, I'd already accepted that I'll be able to go home once a year, for 2 weeks.
Because we spoke earlier about you traveling and having, how do you think culture kind of affects the how to say cultural elements affect into the work? For example, mentioning in the States, I mean, depending on speaking the rhythm and how the pace goes there, it's a very highly intensive like environment for professional and also the business. But Europe, how do you see different cultures kind of affecting the work-life balance?
That's one of those things. We often talk about culture. And I would argue it's more environment than culture. And I tell you why, because I'm pretty sure the environment here is very different than environment in a traditional Albanian company, right? Equally, I see when we have starters coming into our business and they come out from other cultures and other businesses, within a few days, within a week, they think completely different. And they align to the environment they find. So I think Ermela is one of those examples. But we also have an employee from Portugal that was used to be bashed at work, like you did this wrong, you did that wrong. So I remember at the beginning when she was getting some criticism, she was always have this need to defend herself. And it was a funny transition because we as more employees join the company or collaborators join the company, the others like, was me 3 months ago. It was very funny because when she realized she wasn't getting in trouble, we were just sharing, and her behavior changed. She's like, oh, this is actually good. So I can actually learn something here. I don't have to feel this is bad. I can get some feedback and I can go from there. And it was very funny to see the transition. So for me, it's the environment more than the culture. And of course, there are cultural elements that are different in the way we grew up, in our religions, in our behavior that we have every day that impact how we work. But I see it every time. The second you change the environment, you change your behavior. In fact, I'm going to share one anecdote that I see from work. I always used to ask CEOs the question, how come that we have people in businesses that we are seeing as the ones that are not doing the work, they are just doing the bare minimum, and go out of the office and then go and volunteer the whole weekend and give their heart? Like, this is the same person. You know, if I ask the people from the volunteering organization, they will tell you this is the most amazing human being on earth. If I ask the colleagues at work, they will say like, this person, this guy barely does any work. So how come that's the difference? And that what the environment does to you, which is why it's also so important to surround yourself with the environment you want to be in.
Now that you were speaking about the environment, and from a kind of leadership position, like how can leaders improve their environment, and also how can they be up to speed with all of the changes and all of the influences that are working in the, let's say, not market, but yeah, in the ecosystems right now. What can they do better, and where can they focus on?
What often happens, especially with entrepreneurs and leaders, is that at the beginning of your role, you're not very busy, and you start and you get busier and busier. And as you do so, you keep doing everything. And as you do everything, your brain goes on autopilot and does everything it has to do, but it's not fresh anymore. So when I think of the new formula for me for leaders is you should be spending 80% of your time doing the things that it makes a difference if you do them. I have most of the things that I do today, only the things that I'm really good at. Everything else, other colleagues of mine will do. And that's the good way, because what it allows me to do is it allows me to reach an area where I spend 20 hours, 25 hours a week working. I'm always fresh. And when I'm always fresh, I can be creative. I can have ideas. I can do what I'm good at. And I have no roadblocks in that perspective. So the opposite as leaders is when you're working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, that freshness is gone. You don't have time to be active. You don't have time to get love and connection. You don't have time to build connections. You don't have time to read a book, to learn, to watch a YouTube that is about something that is work related, to watch maybe some literature, to do a workshop. All these things are gone. And you're basically running the business with the knowledge you had when you started, while the world has actually moved on. So I have colleagues of mine in consulting, for example, as well. They still use the same slide pack that they used 7 years ago, right? They don't have time to update it. Now you can see where the problem is. The world has moved on, even post-COVID, rapidly. And as a result, you're teaching something that over time will become obsolete. And that for me is the same with leaders. So if you're not creating the space to do those things, you're making yourself and your business as a result obsolete as well.
And going into a little bit deeper, it's in the book, there's like business for P, which is B for P, and it's business for people, for purpose, for profits, and for planet. Mm-hmm. And I would love to just talk about this in what does this mean in a current local context, in the current context.
It's one of our frameworks. We call it the B for P. So if you think of a business traditionally, we always talked about profits, making profits. And it was acceptable to sacrifice one of those P's. For example, if you are doing something that is environmentally not necessarily friendly, but you create jobs in the community, you know, it's kind of okay because we created 1,000 jobs here. Screw the planet, you know. It's the byline. It's just not officially on the brochure. Or if you're doing purpose work, think of all the not-for-profits that we have there that do amazing work. If you go in there, most of those volunteers are completely overworked, you know, but they're doing great purpose work. So it's accepted that where the people will suffer there because it's for the greater good. If you're running a business and you're squeezing every ounce out of the people, it's kind of acceptable as well, because, you know, we're making profits, and profits will build schools and whatever. So that's acceptable as well. Our vision of it is that the new way a business should operate is to have balance, of course, again, but to create a formula where whenever you make something in a business as a service, you're positively impacting those 4 Ps. So it's good for the people, you make profits, which is good for the business should be profitable. It's good for the planet. It's purpose-led work, so you have a very good drive on there, and as a result, it's good for the planet as well. So it's bringing those 4 P together.
And I think more and more now, actually, for this question, it's that I was a couple of months ago, I was at Web Summit, and at one of the panels, which was Future of Work, something that always came up was trust right now. And at first I didn't understand why, and why, I mean, trust. Okay, trust is important in any organization, and creating that trust among fellow employees and with superiors and everyone. It's like, but it's the norm. I mean, it's always been like that. But then later, after searching for it and hearing about it very, very frequently, I was like, okay, but I mean, this is not trust in that context. It's another form of trust. And that is because with all of the changes that after the pandemic and everything, is that with remote work, the relationship have changed a lot, and trust now has a new context and also has a new importance, which we need to kind of enforce. And how do you think like trust among like organizations, and how important is trust, and how does that impact the kind of the market then?
Is that important that it's a chapter in the book? So the irony is, when I ask when I coach an organization, I would ask leaders, is trust important? And I've never heard one single person tell me that it's not important. But when I ask them what are they doing to build trust in companies, that's when I get less answers, right? So it's this elephant in the room, it's this intangible thing that we don't really know how to address. We talked about business school. I think I went to a great business school, yet even trust was not necessarily a topic which was, you know, fundamental in business acumen today. Trust for me goes a long way, and I would argue that most problem in organizations are trust issues in disguise. So when you really go deeper, it's something happened, you know, between me and you 7 years ago, and you never actually apologize for it, or I never apologize for it, and it's still there. So no matter what we do, this is still gonna hang on and be in the air, right? So it might be that the new computer system doesn't work really well, but it might not work really well because we're not working together and we're not trusting each other to work together in the right way. So when you go deeper, trust is a massive issue, but it's not even the fault of people, because this is one of the areas here is, if you don't give people the know-how, if you don't teach people how to build trust within their teams, within their colleagues, within their businesses, we cannot blame them. We cannot expect people to learn everything from themselves. In a certain degree, yes, we can. But overall, if you don't teach the businesses and the founders and the leaders today to think differently and to show them it's okay to think differently, how can we blame them if they are working in traditional ways, if the system teaches them to work in a traditional way?
And something that's very, very important into the way of creating the mechanisms into the organizations. And I thought of my own into also with my team, and the way I totally agree with you that even though trust is something that it's something that we almost take for granted, and we think that yeah, it's always important among ourselves, but we rarely speak about it, and we rarely speak about how does that impact us, and what does that mean for each organization. So I don't want to spoil more about the book, so it's I would just these were some of the questions, but I want to leave you if you want to add something more about the contents of the book, but you can also talk later. But something else is that I want to know, so what's next? What is next for you, and also for the book, but also what are you doing in Albania? If you can share some things with yeah.
What's next is maybe a bit of a recharge, because effectively, while I'm usually pretty good at finding balance, in the last couple of weeks, I worked a little bit more than I wanted. And that's okay. At times you will have to do that. So probably a bit of a recharge. I already enjoyed the weekends going around Albania and exploring areas that I hadn't seen before, like Keparo, Dermi, Himare, Berat, Belshi Lakes, a lake in that area. I'm back to Vlora, so it's been very nice to detox for a weekend. But I need to do more than that and go back to my usual schedule. Other than that, I don't know where this is taking me. It was kind of an idea that originated. So I want to see where this book takes me as well and share it. My why for going on this journey is to have impact. It's I'm one person, I can coach, but I cannot coach. If I want to have a work-life balance, I cannot coach hundreds of people at once. And the book allows me to do that in a more efficient way, to share some knowledge, hopefully inspire some people, and give some people some tools and some areas to think about. So as a result, that was the idea behind the book. And then I would love to share more stories of transformation. So I've interviewed a few people in my book, everyday citizens, some thought leaders, about their transformation, and I've included snippets. But I would love to be able to do more and more in that. So I don't know, maybe we turn it into a podcast and interview more people around the world that can inspire us, and they inspired me as well. So maybe that's where I am at the moment in going next. Almela in the background is already scared. It's like, not, I thought we were done with the book now. Podcast. But that's where my mind is going at the moment. What was the second question?
The second question was about what are you doing? I mean, yeah, in Albania and also outside with any project that you want to share.
I'm finding excuses to come back. I think it's the best way to describe it. No, I came for a conference and I really enjoyed it. I always say the people here are amazing and the vibe is incredible. And then I started to get involved in some projects. At the moment, we have a soft launch of the Digital Nomad Village in Vlora. And we're doing some work there. We're bringing some communities together. We're building a community for expats and for digital nomads. So we have another weekend, an experience weekend, coming up on Friday, where we will mingle for a weekend and get together and explore a bit of Vlora and bring together people that are in Vlora with people that think Vlora is only for the summer. So that's the idea behind it. Other than that, I'm always an advocate. So my personal why in life is creating better tomorrows. And I've chosen the space of work because I think work is very central in our life. And if you can make an impact there, it spreads into families, communities, it inspires others, and it fixes a lot of issues, and it goes there. And in most cultures around the world, work is very central. So I like that. So I'm getting involved in some projects here where I think I can help creating better tomorrow as well. So I'm doing a lot of volunteering into speaking engagement as well, but also helping out. And hopefully I'll be able to do more of that.
Cool. Do you ever think like how lucky we are that we can have this kind of lifestyle, like traveling and working and doing all of the things? And do you ever reflect on that?
I tell you what, yes, I did. But I no longer believe that.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I can. So in the first 6-7 months, I felt like how lucky we are, we can do this. But when I thought about it, And a lot of my colleagues took a break from consulting while we couldn't travel. And especially in Australia, it was really bad because we couldn't even travel between cities. So imagine you're here and you cannot go to Vlora because the borders is there and you can just not do that. But when I thought about it more and more, and I don't know if it's really luck. The luck was the spark that allowed us to slow down a second. Absolutely sure on that. But I think it's been a lot of work to redesign my life, redesign my priorities, really understand what I want to do with my life, and then making it work. That's been hard work. I don't know if that has to do with luck or not. It's really choosing a different path. And I don't know how many times I've heard questions about, are you going to settle down now? Like my mom is one of them. When I arrived to Portugal and really liked it. It's like, oh, you like it in Portugal? It's like, yes, I like it. So you're going to stay now forever there? It's like, I don't know. It's like, but why? And then the same happened with Albania. It's like, you like it in Albania? Is it safe there? Yes, of course. And are you going to stay there? It's closer to us than Portugal. Why don't you stay there? Like, I don't know. So yeah, in that perspective.
But yeah, I mean, I asked this because this is the stigma of the remote work, and everyone who's like into the digital nomad remote work industry, let's say, it's like that kind of lifestyle. Right now, it's of course on the rise, and everybody sees it as a great opportunity. But of course, with it come its challenges, and we often mention that as a lifestyle. That yeah, you go to Portugal, you go to Lisbon. Great lifestyle, you get to meet other like-minded people, but then there's a set of challenges that they come, and also some how to say, there's a price that you have to pay for that kind of lifestyle. And yeah, it's not as beautiful as it sounds, with all of the good parts that come with it. But yeah, something that we're also doing here with our community. It's also kind of bringing awareness and educating, but also not creating that Hollywood style idea of working remote, ideal life. You can go everywhere in the world, be productive, because some people tried it, myself included, and then you get to see, okay, so I mean, productivity goes down unless you work for it to kind of give it up, and then. But yeah, that's a great point to.
Yeah, don't do it. It's a very bad lifestyle.
I mean, it's great, but just.
No, I think
No,
it goes back to that know-how, right? Even here, I had to learn how to be productive and be different and learn how it works on the way. So, for example, one of the things I've noticed is that I don't like to nomad and be in a different place every month. That's not me. I like to have a base. I like to go back to places. I like to spend considerable amount of time there to really get to know it and to really find my balance. So, and now when I come back to Tirana, I have my areas where I am and I explore it from there. So it's almost plug and play. It doesn't require me too much attention into getting customer here, because I am a customer. I have my friends. I have local places where I go. I had a lot of local recommendations for restaurants, bars, and co-livings, co-working. So I have my map of things I go back to. But you have to learn that. If you go into a new destination every 2 weeks, it becomes very stressful very soon, because you don't know anyone. It's very transactional. You get to know people. People will know you move on in 2 weeks. So they will not make an effort to go too deep with you, because they know you're moving on as well. So all those things you have to learn, and you have to find your balance and understand, is this worth to me? So I can knock off 25 cities or 25 countries this year. To me, it's not. But other people will find the balance, say, yeah, it's good for my Instagram. So here you have
that
it.
works too. I mean, it's so right now I want to open the floor to questions. If anyone has any question,
what's your best way of finding balance? Like, what's the balance, the ideal balance for you? Maybe I know it comes with experience, etc., but maybe it's just something like that.
maybe where to start from, like one.
So the question is, given that everyone is different and everyone has their own interpretation of balance, how do you find balance and what's the purpose? Like, what's the journey on that? Is it correct? Perfect. I'm just repeating it so as well. I think you're absolutely correct when you say that everyone is different and everyone has their own balance. I will go even further that you can have a balance one day and the next day doing the same amount of hours on work, doing the same amount of activities after work. It would not give you the same feeling of purpose, of balance, because no 2 days are the same, like no 2 human beings are the same. So you definitely have to find your own way and formula on that. But there are some triggers, there are some areas that you can notice if you are in balance or not. For example, anxiety, stress, the feeling of I haven't done much today, I still have so much stuff to do, the pressure that comes from around you, not sleeping well, not eating well or healthy, not being happy with yourself. Those are all markers that will tell you you're not very balanced at the moment, right? So for me at the moment, working 4 or 5 hours a day doesn't feel like working at all, for a variety of reasons. One is that my work is super aligned with my purpose. I was making this example on the weekend with a friend of mine, and I was saying, if I didn't need to make money for living, I would still do this kind of work because I love it. It gives me energy. It doesn't really drain me. So that's the 80% of the work we talk about, right? I'm good at this. It makes me happy. It's my purpose. So I don't get tired. So when I travel, I don't need a holiday break to be 2 weeks somewhere on a beach to just recharge, right? At the same time, I've found this way of finding that formula that works for me. So how can you find it? When we talk about work-life integration, we need to start thinking about our day differently. We are taught to think in our day of, this is our work. After that, we can spend some time with friends, family, social activities, sports, nutrition, whatever. And then after that, whatever is left, we sleep. And when you start getting busy with work and you work more and more and more, where do we cut the time? We cut it on things that give us energy. We cut it on free time. We cut it on educating and becoming a better human being. We're cutting at social interaction and family and friends. We cut it at sleep, right? So when we do that, we naturally get in this maze, and it doesn't get better, it gets worse, right? So if you ask me where to start, is to start mapping out your day and thinking, what are the things that are important to me, that I should be doing, that I want to do, that give me energy. And when you start looking at that like that, you can see if you're balanced or off balance. Because a day has 24 hours. If at the end of the 24 hours, you still have work left, or no time for sleeping, or no time to give a hug to someone you care about, it's probably where we struggle. Yeah. Hope that answers your question.
So I don't know if it's 2 questions, 1 question. I've got a loud voice.
It's more for the.
Oh, yeah.
Let me, you can unmic, so
Scared.
I think we can reach them.
I'm going to be too loud now. That's the problem. So I suppose my questions, I don't know if it's 2 questions or 1 question, so I'm going to ask. So what's the key takeaway from your book? And do you have a call to action in the book? Are you trying to provoke? Is there a call to action, or is it more trying to educate people? There was 4 questions there. Apologies.
I guess you have to read it. No, just kidding. It's full of call to action. So what I've tried to do is to find balance. So I have interviews, I have my own story that I share. I have research, studies, surveys that I share as well, a lot of data. And every now and then again, I have practical anecdotes from my work. And I have questions and pointers and things to think about and to go back to. So almost every end of the chapter, you have a bunch of questions to work on. So that's the idea of it, to be inspired, but to be very practical as well, while giving away knowledge as well. Yeah. So that's the part. The key takeaway it's going to be different for everyone. I touch on a variety of areas. I touch on leadership. I touch on trust. I touch on digital nomadism. I touch on work-life integration, balance. I touch on what's happening actually with this great shift, how people are waking up, how people are choosing different paths. I share example of people that have shared different paths. So I hope that I've written the book in a way that people can get some very practical insights, but it also will take you where you need to go. So I've had a book launch club and around 20 people have read it. And the feedback has been very positive. The irony is it's been very specific in very different ways. So one person said, I love the section about building meaningful connections, right? Another one said like, wow, the leadership chapter, that was my favorite. Others said, I like the practical anecdotes to mix it up. Others again said the call to action is great. I was sitting down and actually doing it. So it's very different in that way. That's what I would say.
Anyone else?
In Toronto, where can we find the book in Toronto? It's on Amazon, and I know Amazon is a pain for Albania. We were looking into alternatives over the weekend. It's available on Kindle, which is the ebook version that's accessible everywhere in the US store and every store, and some other affiliates with it. One of the questions we've been getting is like, how can I read it if I don't have the Kindle ebook reader? You can actually download the Kindle app. So, and it's on promotion today. So that's the easiest way to get it quick. In Albania at the moment, we're looking into alternatives, but my understanding is, which comes from Armela and from Arlen's, is you can access it through the Amazon US store, but it will take some time to get here. We tried to print some copies for today, but we failed. So that didn't work out.
I mean, it's also the time wasn't very promising because we just had the conversation about the event like on Thursday, Friday, and we didn't have time to prepare, even though we tried to do. But in the future, we're going to try to kind of also speak with some. So we have, in the US, it's Amazon. We have two, which is Bookinist and also Adrian, our own kind of Amazon. For us that we love books, it's mainly physical because you have to go to the store. And for me, I also like the experience going and seeing all the, but yeah, we'll also speak with Valer, who's a good friend, about like having like a physical, because yeah, he's also kind of a publisher. But yeah, that has to be in the near future.
I texted him. We're in the process.
Okay.
Right. Hi. Thanks for the invitation and everything you said, actually. Seems like it really does come from a lot of thought, a lot of putting the heart into it. So congratulations. Now,
Faliminderi, this is the one I know.
Bitteschön. Or prego. So now, apart from the very well-deserved notes, how much of a ChatGPT did you use for this one?
I used it. I love ChatGPT in that way. I used it in a different way. So I used it for references, for example. I used it to bounce off things. I wrote the book myself. I worked with an editor, and it was an amazing experience. I think you asked me, one of the questions I missed was the process. The process was, at the beginning, I was just going with the flow. And then I hired an editor last November, and I started working with her. And she guided me through the process. It was amazing. She's one of those transformation stories herself, comes with a PhD in mathematics background, now turned copywriter and writer and editor, and is writing her own book. That was the most rewarding part. I used ChatGPT to just give me some facts and prove things. So, hey, I've written this stuff here. I don't remember the reference. Can you check that for me? And it did. And then, of course, I went and checked the references. or hey, can you give me this trend here? Is this accurate? A lot of times I used it just to bounce off. Can I write this differently? Can you give it to me in a different way? I used it for that way. I didn't use it for the writing itself, because even if I wanted, I couldn't, because at the time I was writing it, ChatGPT was offline and was blocked by 2020 knowledge 21. My book happens post-pandemic, so most of the knowledge and studies are quite fresh and new. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't, because it wasn't connected to the internet. I probably could now, but yeah.
Check any content that's published on Amazon. They can even take them down if they detect that there's.
Yes, we also have a couple of companies that are doing generational GPT plagiarism checkers. We have one from Kosovo, which is very famous, but they only can go until 80%. So the rest of 20%, again, also with the Amazon, always leaves the space open for any original work. So you can never say 100% it was written by ChatGPT. That's the issue. So it's always very suggestive. So yeah, very super interesting. So actually, people can use ChatGPT and help them not to so because there's a big sense around that people are just using ChatGPT to write books right now, and very happy that you did so before 2021. It's a very good argument. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great tool, but it depends how you use the tool, right? So for me,
Because it's for everyone's big question right now, and this is why I was asking also to get to pick your mind a little bit and what you think is actually happening right there with this, what half of the people call revolution, and the other half have no idea, and they're afraid that this will lead into the doomsday for human beings. So how do you see that for any other writer writing in the future? How's that going to impact that? That was more or less also the question.
look, having the editor for me was the biggest thing. That made the biggest impact. Having ChatGPT available there was interesting and a fun way to do it. But the reality is the way I wanted to write my book, with being practical, with sharing knowledge and case studies and anecdotes from my clients, anecdotes from the people I've interviewed. In that way, I couldn't have even done it that way. And I shared my personal story. So ChatGPT does know my personal story. Now, my take on it is like you can use it in a way as an assistant, and that works well, and it worked well for me. If you use it to write a book, then the chances are that I write, ChatGPT, write me a book about digital nomadism, and then you come along and say, ChatGPT, write me a book about digital nomadism. And then you come along and say, hey, write me a book about digital nomadism. So at the end of the day, that content will not stand out, right? So you might get lucky for a little while the system is new, and you might be the first one to market, but it won't stand out. And eventually will happen what happened with many academics over the years, when they connected the internet and realized half of it was plagiarized. And eventually will catch up to you. That's my take to it.
Getting back to that, sorry, last question, if I may. So taking along to what you just said, so I'd like to focus a little bit on that. If one would like to be a critic, then they would join that bunch of readers and critics and reviewers who actually say there's too many books out there already on personal improvements, leadership, self-help, the more the merrier. And that's already, everything is already out there. So there's a quite market now saturated for that. So what's your take on that? And why is this book different?
Well, it's a really
Apart
good
from
question.
me having to read it, of course.
It's different per se by the way it's been written and designed and thought through. So with the practical stuff, with the call to action, with the very informal way of writing. So that per se, by the nature it's written, is not an academic book. It's not a book about leadership, which is 500 pages and By the time you get to chapter 2, you're like, okay, I need to be Monday morning. I need to be fresh for this. Like I'm not reading after work. I don't think there can be enough self-improvement books out there. Because the irony is you may like my style, but she might not, right? So even if the two of us have the same book with the same content, but it's written in a different style, it might resonate with one person and not the other person. So even if that's the purpose out there, it hits an agenda of helping people. So, and you can see that you can talk about something with a person and you say, oh, great, I've read it in the book about this person. And you don't even know who this person is, and it hasn't crossed your path, and you may even go and it doesn't resonate. So for me, there is a lot out there, but it's not enough because it's vastly still unexplored. Like speak about self-improvement with your dad or your grandfather, and they will look at you like you're speaking Chinese, right? So it's something that is still relatively new, and we haven't even touched the surface, from my perspective. Yeah.
Okay. So, some people are self-aware and some people are not. So, what are some signs that to understand that we are on the bad direction going through life and through work?
Yeah. It's a great question. I wouldn't necessarily call it bad direction, because when I look back, some of those learnings have been big, and even if I haven't had those learnings, my change wouldn't be as profound today. But they might not be the most healthy habits, right? I go back to the question about balance. So anything in relation to your health and your energy and your state of mind is a good marker. If you find yourself constantly drained, if you find yourself feeling like you're letting people down, all these markers for me are markers that maybe you have some work to do, or maybe you can explore a different path. Yeah. That's probably the more imminent that it comes to mind. Now, if you're talking about a leader or a business founder, right, that's a very different again. It's if your business is not going the right direction, if you're finding yourself that you're always a touch away from burnout, if you're finding yourself that you're going on this massive weeks of work and then you cannot think straight anymore and you need to take a break for 4 or 5 days before you can think again straight, that's another marker. From a leadership perspective, if you're finding yourself that more and more people are leaving rather than joining, if they are leaving in shorter time frames, if your staff turn and churn is getting higher and higher, meaning if people stay in the business a shorter time or stay working for you in a shorter time, that's another marker that maybe your leadership style is not aligned with that. So there are a lot of markers. They're usually connected with productivity or engagement, right? As an employee, as a human being, and as a business. So I have a much better relationship with my mom today than I had 3 years ago. Growing up, I had a wonderful relationship with my parents. But over time, I lost that. I cannot tell you exactly where, but I know when I came back to Europe, I didn't speak to my mom for 2 months, which was a record for me. And I remember going to uni in England, and we used to talk every day in a very natural way. It wasn't same with my dad, you know. So those are all markers. If things that are important to you feel like you're lacking behind, it's usually there. And the advice is to get trusted people that you can take it from, you know. I had this friend of mine, Cham, growing up, and he always used to give it to me straight. But I would take it for him because I knew I trusted him and he would be coming from a great place, from his heart. So I used to work in a club, and I used to run there at night to run the bar. It was my way of funding my university degree. and saving money to go to university. And he's like, Dom, I'm very proud of you. You made it from one side of the bar to the other, right? That still sticks with me today. Because there was a trusted person that gave me that feedback. So not everyone is self-aware. It's true. It's absolutely true. I wasn't self-aware, in most part of my career. But there is always someone that you trust that is there and can pinpoint you in the right direction. But you have to listen to it. And to yourself as well is equally important.
And just if I can add something to that, I think right now it's the moment where, so before, I mean, there used to be, when it comes to personal development stuff, there used to be people who go through their entire lifetime not being aware about something that they can improve, processes, ways of work, ways of thinking. And, but right now that's very, very relevant. And I think even though with all of the books and all of the, I mean, sometimes it looks overwhelming, the number of self-learning, I mean, motivational and everything, I still don't think we reach the level of awareness that we need to as a kind of speaking globally, because some societies have reached that even before. But I think, I still think that now it's more relevant than ever. And we still haven't reached that threshold where the awareness is there in the, also because of the exposure. And I don't know what you think about this in a way, and this would lead to a question like, right now, are we more exposed than any other, let's say, previous generation, our parents, or even more, into how important the relationship between our relationship with the work and with the balance? Are we more exposed, or this is just something that's, we are more educated and this is why we're speaking more?
It's a really good question. In some ways, it's a really good question. In some ways, you really get access to everything if you search for it. But there is a lot out there as well. And how do I find what's relevant for me? So that makes it challenging. The second part of it is like the pressure from the system that we are in is much higher than maybe it was in the past. So I go back and think of my dad in his work running the restaurant. The pressure when it comes to work was completely on him, right? The pressure when it comes to educating us and being there, it was completely on my mom. Now, today, the same pressure is on both. So both parents usually have the same pressure at work, the same pressure at childcare. And the grandparents are also still working. So they're not anymore a relief like it used to be when I was growing up. My grandmother was not working. If I know anything about Albanian culture so far, it's very similar to South Italian. So it's not very far off that. So the relief is gone. So the stress that we're getting from the system is even higher. The commercials, the need of having very commercial things around us as well. You need to own a house before you're 35 or 40, because otherwise you haven't made it, right? That stress adds on the stress. So if anything, I think it's higher than before.
I agree. Yeah. Okay.
So this is a book about mindset, work-life balance, and the future of workforce. I think only on these three phrases one could spend a couple of hours, I suppose. But so yeah, there is quite a lot of ongoing literature and research, even now, even every day more, I think, with regards to mindset. Turns out a lot of people believe that if you don't change your mindset, then you can read all the self-help books that you want. But now, how do you change that mindset, and how you focus on you and being in the now and all of that, and figuring out what you really want to do in life doesn't seem to be that easy. That's why not everybody can do it. That's one thing. But if I would rather focus on something and be curious to pick your mind on probably an imminent issue with regards to the country that we're having a discussion right now, is really the issue about workforce. So to make it very concrete, in case you would be the prime minister of this country and you would actually have to run an investment forum, I don't know, what they call it right now, Western Balkans, whatever summit. And then there would be a topic on workforce and why everybody's leaving the whole region now. This is not only Albania, this is all the region, the whole Western Balkans, right? How would you actually tackle that issue right now? With and is that an issue? If that's an issue, if you think that's an issue, even maybe that's not.
So it's two questions. They're really good, both of them, very deep. I could talk about it for hours. The first question about mindset shift, you can read all the self-help books, but if you don't change your mindset, it's true. The thing, however, is we're not trained for that. Okay, we get trained on how to ride a bicycle when we're young. And our parents or someone else will spend hours. If not, we will learn it ourselves, right? But we don't talk about mindset. We don't talk about stress. We don't talk about anxiety. We don't talk about anything in that space, right? So when we get into that space, it's very challenging and very difficult because we have to learn everything again on top of unlearning what we previously thought is right. So your mindset is always challenging yourself. And when you finally think you've cracked it, you talk to your friend and your friend goes like, no, but what about this and that, because obviously he or she might not be on the same journey, right? So you're having a double function. You're inspiring someone else to open their mind, but you're also being pulled back, right? So the reality is that this is one of those areas, if you want to become a great leader, you have to do the work. You have to learn, you have to apply, you have to fall down, you have to restart again, you have to relearn. And it takes time. And my mindset today is very different than my mindset 2 years ago. And 2.5 years ago when I started, the jump is massive. I was doing a yoga session in Morocco 1 month ago. And the yoga teacher was telling me that at the beginning, you make very fast progress because 80% of the blocks are mental blocks. You think your body cannot do that, right? It's very similar in the space of work and mindset. You think that's not possible until you do it and when it works. And then you start going deeper and deeper and deeper. And you do all those baby steps and eventually you make it bigger. That's why, and that's how it works. So you can read those books and the reality is all those books will impact you a little bit. And before you know it, you're on this massive journey. But it doesn't feel like it because it feels like nothing is moving, right? So that's the mindset part of the question. The other one, I am not qualified to be the prime minister. I don't even have an Albanian passport. I know I am some percentage Albanian in my DNA, but I don't think that qualifies me to be a prime minister. Generically speaking about workforce, and this is for any country that I work with or I work in, the focus for me is in the education side of what work means, how we create healthy habits, what importance it should have, how we become high performance, because that's the ultimate goal. Like I want to work 4 or 5 hours a day, but in those 4 or 5 hours a day, I want to be high performance, right? And today in some of those 4-hour blocks that I work, I'm more productive than in a day in my previous life, right? Previous work life, not like physically, like 3 years ago. So the game for me is high performance. How do I become the master of what I do in the time that I work? So this whole new way of thinking, and that's for me, the spend would be on education. And when I say education, is also beyond the human being, because you know you can go home and you can say, I found a remote job, very happy, and your parents will say like, well, but what about health insurance, and what about rent and pension, and what about going to the corner office? And if you don't work in the bank, you still get an office, or how does this work? Right? So that education piece is very important. So that's where I would spend some money on. And that's generic advice because I'm not qualified to be the prime minister.
Okay, so mine is not a question, just trying to say thank you for the session. It was amazing to hear and to see you do such a great achievement as writing a book and launching it in Albania. So congratulations. I'm pretty sure we will read very interesting and fantastic stuff in there, and we will come up with questions. So leave the door open to questions and tell us how.
Absolutely. We can do that in live sessions and Q&A. So I'm planning to do more of sessions like this. Ideally wherever I travel and I have a break, but also when I come back here, I would love to maybe redo the session and do it for people that have read the book as well. So absolutely. And you can always reach me on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. If you want my number, you can reach me on my phone as well.
Is the book
Instagram.
club still the book club on LinkedIn? Is it open yet or not?
The book launch club we haven't opened a book club. So maybe, Armela, more work for you. Maybe we need to think of a book club for people who have read it and have questions on it. Yes. Yeah. So I would say that immediately would be Instagram and LinkedIn. And that's been one of the most rewarding things in the last couple of days. Random text messages on LinkedIn from, hey, I'm reading your book. I just had to put it down to send you a message. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you. So I'm always happy to receive a message like that. I'm also happy to receive a question that makes me think further. So I think one of the great things from my editor was that she kept pushing me and say, hey, but what about this? And what about that? So if we want a sequel and you're not happy with something, so you want me to go deeper, let me know. Yeah, I'll be happy to take those questions.
Okay, so we move thank you for being here, and yeah, thanks everyone for attending. We can move the conversation. We can have a drink on us, and then we can have some question personally if you want to network and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, and thanks for doing this. Great interviewer. So thank you for that.
That was a first. Yeah.